The threats to legal services started probably, well, certainly first year that I was a legal services lawyer with that case that I mentioned, the Medi-Cal case. And Senator Murphy from California at the time got an amendment through the Senate which basically would have prohibited several of the activities that legal services lawyers could do. It didn't pass the House, but it was a wake-up for a number of people that there could be political interference. When Reagan was elected, the bulk of our funding was from the Legal Services Corporation, and it was clear that we were gonna get less.
When Reagan came in, he originally wanted to eliminate legal services because he'd fought with legal services when he was governor of California.
Instead of having a supportive presence in DC at the federal level, it was just the opposite.
And he couldn't accomplish that, but what he did accomplish was big cuts.
I had to make decisions, which were very difficult, to close offices and lay people off.
The first thing that I remember is that my offer letter for Evergreen Legal Services said, you know, we're excited to extend this offer, and something along the lines of, and by the way, please understand that if we lose funding, you don't have a job, right? I was like, oh, okay, got it, got that. This is like not secure.
But the biggest effect is always on how many people you can help, how many people you can represent.
In hindsight, if you look at the current political climate, a lot of the unleashing of hatred and divisiveness has been off of the backs of certain groups that have been targeted expressly. And if you look at who those groups are, they are people of color, religious minorities, people with disabilities, and so forth. So in some ways you could say that the way Greg set it up, although he didn't have the language to articulate any of this, he just intuitively understood that legal services was the last resort to give voice in some way to right the imbalance of power for these voiceless populations.
The Legal Services Corporation in the 70s was supportive, and they would come and do what's called monitoring, and the monitoring was, oh, you're doing a great job, but you could maybe do this a little better. And then it became what was called attack monitoring under Reagan and then actually under Bush.
We were in a very elite gang of organizations that were being targeted by what we called gotcha interrogation, investigative monitoring teams.
Where they came and tried to find stuff, and they went after organizations like Evergreen Legal Services.
California Rural Legal Assistance Project, Mississippi Legal Services.
That were doing high impact work.
And the theme we had in common was people of color.
And so it was a psychological effect, an effect on the clients, but also just a change in the tone.
There was definitely a tension there because people who were just trying to do good work and make a difference in their communities were really under attack.
These folks were almost like they were from the Inquisition, and particularly looking at the books.
If their goal was to paralyze the administrative team, they did a pretty good job of that.
They wanted to intimidate clients. Sometimes it was just a joke.
Somebody came to my office and demanded to know if a board member, Chris O'Donnell, was related to a staff attorney named Mike O'Connell. And I actually had to say, the last time I looked, C and D were not the same letter of the alphabet. This is how absurd the whole thing was. You just have to look back to November 8th and what preceded it to understand there was the intentional strategic targeting of all the populations that we disproportionately are called to serve.
The current administration, in their proposed budget, has zeroed out funding for Legal Service Corporation. So if that came to pass, it would be a train wreck here. And it doesn't matter how much the state reinvest, we're still going to be a huge shortfall because of the loss of the federal. So not just our state, but I will tell you the ABA is involved with this and coordinating efforts, and everybody is just really, if you will, ramping up their efforts to make sure we are not losing that federal Legal Service Corporation funding.
Certainly the client communities that are suffering from this are on the mat. The people who have devoted their entire careers or are entering CLS and the Alliance because they're committed to this work are on the mat. And the work, in part, is about how do we come together with a way to endure what is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
But I also think it's amazing that we and other organizations nationally have weathered all this. And I think it speaks very strongly towards, are you ever really going to be able to get rid of us? I think the answer is no, which is good.